Well, in the U.S., it was another day, another setback for Donald Trump and his drive for absolute presidential power. In the latest sign of trouble, the Senate narrowly approved a so-called war powers resolution that would require Donald Trump to seek congressional authorization before continuing military operations against Iran. That measure passed 50 to 48 with bipartisan support as 4 Republicans broke ranks to vote in favor. Now, that resolution is non-binding. It means it doesn't carry the force of law and is unlikely to trigger an immediate policy shift. But even so, the Republican defections are being viewed as a notable rebuke to Trump, who has maintained a firm grip on most GOP lawmakers so far. Trump will be doing some damage control today by having lunch with some of the Republican senators for the first time in a year. In the meantime, we're going to break all this apart with France 24's Doug Herbert, who joins me on the set. So, Doug, this resolution, as I was saying, it's non-binding. It doesn't have the force of law. Nonetheless, it's still a rebuke to Donald Trump.
And it's not just a rebuke, but I think we have to underline it is a rare rebuke. These things don't happen to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has more or less had a stranglehold, a chokehold on his party, and the ironclad loyalty of almost every Republican in Congress, which essentially means that the judicial branch of the U.S. government, because of the Republican sort of loyalty, fierce loyalty to Trump, has been sort of nullified, neutralized. Congress has not served as a check on Donald Trump. There haven't been enough Democrats, because they are in the minority, to keep or hold Donald Trump accountable. Now, the War Powers Resolution, just a reminder of what it is. We talk about it, but like, what is it, right? It requires, it was an act of Congress originally passed in '73, and as of today, it requires a president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing armed forces abroad. And it also forbids that same president from keeping those armed forces in that conflict situation more than 60 days without getting a green light from Congress, or whatever, or having a formal declaration of war. So Donald Trump didn't declare war, right? In fact, he never really thought. He always said there was a ceasefire going on. The reason that this is a big deal is, you could say, 10 times lucky for Congress. They tried. This was the 10th attempt to try to rein in, to try to limit Donald Trump's ability to essentially go it alone in the Iran war, to wage it as he sees fit, Congress be damned. On the previous attempts, it had been either nullified because they didn't get the Republicans on board, they just didn't have the votes. They only got it this time, as you said at the outset, because 4 Republicans broke ranks, and I will note that 2 other Republicans were absent from the room, including Mitch McConnell, who's now being hospitalized. He couldn't make the vote physically. It would have been a tie otherwise. So it was narrow, but it passed, and it shows the reason it is significant is that these things don't happen to Donald Trump, at least not in this term of his presidency. People do not oppose Donald Trump in his own party, but they are now. And it shows amazing unease with Donald Trump's handling of the Iran conflict, the Iran war, and the so-called ceasefire talks. A lot of Republicans are skeptical about just how precarious they seem to be, and they want details about what's going to happen going forward. So it's very rare, and it is significant.
Now, Republicans who opposed the resolution said they opposed it because it was pointless. Tell us more about that argument.
Yeah. They say, A, it's pointless because, as we said, right, it has no legal force. But that's sort of put that besides the point. It's true. This will not go to Trump for a signature or a veto. He would obviously veto it. But what the Republicans are also saying is it's also moot because, look, you don't even have a war anymore. You have a ceasefire, and you have Donald Trump actually earnestly engaged in negotiations over a 60-day period for a peace deal. So what are they talking about, reining in his military actions? But that's the exact point, because the deal itself, there's still a lot. There's very little eye to eye between Washington and Iran at this point on exactly what the terms of the so-called Memorandum of Understanding, this tentative ceasefire, really means, what the terms of an eventual peace deal would actually look like. And there's very much Trump himself has threatened that he is ready to resume the bombing if Iran doesn't get aboard and get aboard and see the light and sign this deal and make peace. So for the Republicans, this is still very much, even if it's a war in abeyance right now with a very precarious, tenuous ceasefire, it's a war that could resume at any time with continued big hits for the economy, with continued uncertain objectives, and with the potential for greater regional escalation.
Right. As we were saying earlier, Doug, and just very briefly, this doesn't compel Trump to change his policy, but Democrats do see it as a very significant moment.
They see it as so significant because, right, they have no illusions that this is all of a sudden going to make Trump say, oh, sorry, guys, I should have gone to Congress. I'll go now and I'll seek authorization. Of course he's not going to do that. Of course he doesn't see any point in this whole war powers resolution. He doesn't see even why he has to be held accountable by Congress for the way he is conducting himself in Iran. But for the Democrats, it's the gesture. It is the symbolic, yes, symbolic act of registering their principled opposition to the way Donald Trump has handled, unilaterally conducted this war without, as other presidents have done, almost every other president, without at least seeking some sort of discussion with Congress, a bipartisan discussion, and being more transparent about what the objectives are and what the plans are going forward. From the Democrats' perspective, Donald Trump has treated both Congress and, by extension, the American people with nothing but contempt by essentially saying, trust me, I know what I'm doing. The Congress, whether out of fear or favor or whatever, they have marched in lockstep with Trump. But in this case, they are saying, actually, Mr. President, we love you. We love your policies, these are the Republicans, but not so fast. On this one, we need some more details, and this is exactly what the Democrats are trying to press for. They're actually trying to make the Republicans more responsible so the Congress can get a little bit of its mojo back and once again resume its role as one of the three pillars, checks and balances of the U.S. government.